There is an ancient story that global elites prefer to keep in the shadows. A story of three names that became symbols of resistance to the system. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, young men who refused to bow before the golden statue of King Nebuchadnezzar. But this is not just a religious parable from a Sunday school class. It is a coded blueprint for what is unfolding right now in the 21st century. Archaeological excavations in Iraq have uncovered the remains of massive Babylonian structures. Historians remain silent about what was found among the runes tablets describing mass worship rituals, systems of total population control, and methods of enforcing religious conformity. Babylon did not disappear. It evolved and now returns in a new form. Nebuchadnezzar II ruled the most powerful empire of his time. 6 centuries before Christ, Babylon stretched from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea. But the true power of Nebuchadnezzar lay not in his army or gold, but in his ability to build a system where diverse nations, cultures, and religions were united under a single symbol of authority. Imagine a vast city, its towers reaching the clouds, gold flowing through the streets, and thousands of people of different backgrounds working toward one idea, the glory of the empire. The hanging gardens, the Tower of Babel, and palaces of blue-glazed stone were all the backdrop for Nebuchadnezzar's central project. That project was religious unification. All conquered peoples were required not only to serve the emperor, but to worship the imperial symbol. The golden statue became the embodiment of this vision. 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide measurements that still send a chill down the spines of those who understand their symbolic meaning. Yet among millions of obedient subjects stood 4 young exiles from Israel, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who remained faithful to principles stronger than the fear of death. Daniel rose quickly within the empire's administration. His wisdom and dream interpretation made him indispensable to the king. But his 3 friends faced a harsher test. Though appointed to provincial leadership, their loyalty would be challenged by fire. When the decree came to build the golden statue, a new phase of religious experimentation began in Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar understood. To rule over diverse nations, a single object of worship was essential. The statue was not just religious, it was a political tool of control. Today, as the world moves toward global unification, as international bodies impose uniform standards of thought, and media shape the minds of billions, the story of the 3 young men sounds prophetic. They faced the same dilemma believers now confront. The system does not demand open idolatry, only silent consent to principles that contradict divine truth. Moral relativism instead of absolute truth. Social justice instead of divine justice. Global unity instead of loyalty to the Creator. Archaeological findings show that the worship of the statue was not a one-time event but a recurring ritual. Each day, when sacred music played, all citizens were required to stop their work and bow before Babylon's symbol of might. The 3 young men stood at a crossroads, not just for their lives, but for the destiny of their people. To refuse meant death by fire. To agree meant betrayal of their faith, of their God, of the one who led their ancestors out of Egypt. They chose faithfulness, and that decision changed history. Their defiance became a prophetic image of the trials to come, when every soul must choose whom it truly serves. In the second minute of our story, a confronting question arises. Are we willing to admit that Nebuchadnezzar's golden statue never disappeared, but merely changed its shape? Can we recognize its silhouette in the modern symbols of power that demand our daily devotion? Excavations in ancient Babylon have revealed details long hidden by historians. The golden statue was not just a religious symbol. It was the most advanced system of mass mind control of its time. Archaeologists discovered remnants of an acoustic system capable of projecting sacred music over several kilometers. Nebuchadnezzar understood mass psychology better than today's political strategists. He knew that a person who repeats the same ritual daily gradually loses the ability to think critically. Worship became reflexive and automatic part of life. Cuneiform tablets show that the ceremonies involved not just music, but aromatic incense with psychoactive effects. People fell into trances, their consciousness more open to manipulation. The technologies of mind control that we associate with the 20th century were already active in ancient Babylon. The golden statue stood 90 feet high and 9 feet wide. In ancient numerology, 6 symbolized the flaw of human nature, the striving for divinity without divine nature. 60 by 6 formed a symbol that would later be known as the number of the beast. Today, the golden statue has taken new forms, but its essence remains. It is a system of values proposed as universal and binding for all humanity. Globalism, tolerance, multiculturalism, beautiful words that conceal the same principle of forced unification Nebuchadnezzar once enforced. Modern media now act as Babylon's sacred instruments. When we turn on the TV, radio, or social networks, the same music of worship plays digitally. We bow before screens, absorbing information that shapes our minds, not realizing how our ability to think independently fades away. International organizations establish global standards in education, health, and human rights. At first glance, it seems rational and progressive. But look closer. Behind these standards lies the same principle of religious unification Nebuchadnezzar used. Diversity of thought, tradition, and belief is gradually replaced by a single, correct viewpoint. Those who dare to question it face social pressure, loss of livelihood, and isolation. The mechanisms of coercion have become more refined, but their essence remains unchanged. The 3 young men in Babylon faced this same situation. They held respected positions in the empire's administration, enjoying comfort and privilege. Bowing to the statue would preserve their careers, their place in the system. But they saw the cost was too high. Refusing to bow challenged not just Nebuchadnezzar's religious policies, but the very concept of total control over human consciousness. Today, as global elites craft a new golden statue, a system of values meant to rule the world, the story of the 3 young men becomes even more relevant. It reminds us that there is always an alternative to surrendering to the system. There are principles more important than social acceptance, truths that cannot be compromised, and there is a God who still protects those who remain faithful, even in the fiery furnace of the modern age. When Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego received word of the mandatory worship ceremony, they found themselves in a situation that exposed the true nature of human character. It was the moment when all masks fall away, when outward piety can no longer hide the condition of the soul. Archaeological research confirms the scale of the event. The ceremony was organized with overwhelming grandeur. Thousands of officials, soldiers, merchants, and citizens gathered on the plain of Dura. The golden statue gleamed under the sun. Musicians stood ready. A massive furnace blazed nearby, prepared to consume anyone who dared to disobey the emperor's order. The psychology of the crowd worked flawlessly. When thousands act in unison, the individual feels the immense pressure to conform. Resisting becomes physically difficult. The body wants to mimic the crowd. The mind shuts down, and self-preservation overtakes principle. The three young men stood in that sea of bowed faces, feeling every cell in their bodies scream with danger. Around them were familiar colleagues, friends they had worked with for years. All were about to kneel, and only these three would remain standing. Psychologists describe this as the point of no return, the moment where one choice defines all that follows. One could compromise, rationalize, saying, "I believe in God inwardly. These outward gestures mean nothing," or, "It's more important to stay alive and serve God later than to die a pointless death now." But the young men knew there is a line that must not be crossed. Beyond it, compromise becomes betrayal. Bowing to the statue was not just an empty ritual, it was surrendering conscience to the system. They remembered the words once spoken on a fiery mountain, "You shall not make for yourself an idol. You shall not bow down to them or serve them." Written by the finger of God on tablets of stone, these commands could not be overturned by any human power. When the sacred music began and thousands fell prostrate before the golden statue, the three young men remained standing. Their defiance was so striking that even in the vast crowd they were immediately noticed. The Chaldeans, jealous of the young men's success, quickly reported their disobedience to King Nebuchadnezzar. They had long awaited this moment, the chance to eliminate rivals who had risen high by merit. The king's fury was terrible. A man used to absolute control, he could not believe that anyone would dare defy him. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual, and commanded the 3 rebels be brought before him. What followed became one of the most dramatic confrontations in human history. The most powerful ruler in the world stood face to face with 3 young men who would not bow. "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image I have set up?" the king asked, offering them one last chance. The young men's response became a declaration of spiritual resistance against total control. "O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If the God we serve is able to deliver us from the blazing furnace, he will deliver us from your hand. But even if he does not, know this: we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image you have set up." These words carried a revolutionary idea. There is a power higher than earthly authority, principles worth more than life, and truths that cannot be compromised. The 3 young men proclaimed freedom of conscience in a world where such freedom was unthinkable. King Nebuchadnezzar's order was final heat the furnace 7 times hotter than usual. The strongest guards of the royal army were commanded to bind the 3 young men and throw them into the flames. But what happened next shattered the limits of human imagination. Historical research on Babylonian furnaces shows their incredible sophistication. Metal workers of that era could reach temperatures of over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit enough to melt copper and bronze. Under such heat, the human body would turn to ash in seconds. The fire blazed so intensely that the very soldiers who threw the youths into the furnace died from its heat. Their bodies couldn't withstand even brief exposure. It seemed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were doomed. The king watched the execution from a safe distance, expecting a quick end. But what he saw made him lose his voice. Instead of 3 burning bodies, he saw 4 figures walking freely in the flames, alive and untouched. Did we not cast 3 men bound into the fire? The king asked. Certainly, O king, his advisers replied. But I see 4 men loose, walking in the fire without harm, and the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods, the 4th in the fire. This mysterious figure has sparked centuries of theological debate. Who was this divine protector who appeared at the critical moment? Many believe he was the pre-incarnate Word, the Son of God, present to defend the faithful even then. This moment is rich with prophetic meaning. The 3 youths represent the faithful remnant of the last days, refusing to bow to the beast or its image. The furnace symbolizes the great tribulation before Christ's return. The 4th in the fire is the promise of divine protection for those who remain true to the end. The fire should have consumed not only their bodies, but their bones and ashes. Yet the young men walked out alive. Not even their clothes were scorched. No smell of smoke clung to them, and the ropes that had bound them were burned away. This detail holds deep symbolism. The fire destroyed only what had restrained them, ropes that symbolized bondage and humiliation. But everything that belonged to them personally remained untouched. Divine protection was precise and purposeful. Nebuchadnezzar was stunned. The most powerful ruler on earth stood powerless before 3 young men who had placed their trust in God. The furnace, meant to punish, became the place of encounter with the divine. The king approached the furnace and shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out." His tone had changed from rage to reverence, from fury to awe, before a power greater than his own. When the 3 came out, governors, satraps, and royal officials gathered around them. All witnessed the miracle. Those who moments ago demanded their death now marveled at their unharmed bodies. There were no burns, not even singed hair. Their robes were unchanged. Not a trace of fire remained. The divine intervention was undeniable. Even the skeptics were silenced. This moment altered not only the lives of the 3, but also the spiritual landscape of Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar publicly acknowledged the power of the God of Israel and issued a decree to protect his worshippers. The trial by fire revealed the true nature of divine authority. Earthly rulers can threaten the body, but they have no power over the soul. God, however, can preserve both body and spirit for those who trust him completely. The mystery of the 4th in the fire has stirred the minds of theologians, mystics, and prophets for millennia. Who was this figure who appeared in the furnace beside the 3 young men? Nebuchadnezzar described him as one like a son of the gods. This detail opens deep layers of biblical prophetic symbolism. The original Hebrew text uses the phrase Bar Elohim, son of the gods or of divine beings. In the monotheistic faith of Israel, this could only mean one thing, a divine being uniquely united with the Most High. Many scholars see in this figure the pre-incarnate Word, the second person of the Trinity, who defended the faithful even before his earthly manifestation. The number 4 holds special meaning in biblical numerology. While 3 symbolizes divine perfection, 4 represents the fullness of creation, the universality of divine presence. The 4th in the fire shows us that God is present, even in places where his presence seems impossible, in danger, in trials, in the very heart of despair. Ancient writings describe the 4th as having an appearance unlike any human. Nebuchadnezzar, who had seen countless gods of many nations, immediately recognized the figure as supernatural. His radiance, his presence, his movements all indicated that this protector belonged to a different realm. Modern scholars, studying theophanies, appearances of God in the Old Testament, note many parallels between the 4th in the fire and other divine encounters. The same protector who went before Israel in a pillar of cloud and fire, the same warrior who appeared to Joshua before the battle of Jericho, the same angel who wrestled with Jacob by the Jabbok River. This phenomenon holds prophetic relevance for understanding the end times. In the book of Revelation, John sees visions of the church's final tribulation before Christ's return. There, too, appears a protector who accompanies the faithful through their greatest trials. To the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, where she is nourished for a time, times, and half a time, from the face of the serpent. Divine protection in the darkest moments of history is not a coincidence. It is part of the eternal plan of salvation. There is also a profound psychological truth here. The 3 young men were cut off from the world by a wall of deadly flame alone, with their fear and doubt. And it was precisely then that the 4th appeared. His presence not only saved them from physical death, it gave them emotional strength, assurance they were not alone. When someone faces overwhelming evil, the deepest fear is abandonment, the idea that we must fight alone. The 4th in the fire dispels that illusion. He shows that even when God seems silent, he is still at work, not watching from afar, but entering the fire with those who trust him. Modern parallels abound. In stories from underground churches under totalitarian regimes, prisoners, secret preachers, persecuted missionaries often testify of sensing divine presence in their darkest hours. The 4th still appears where faith demands the highest price. Nebuchadnezzar could not comprehend what he saw. For a pagan king familiar with many gods, a divine figure was strange but not impossible. Yet the magnitude of the miracle shook even his occult-trained mind. He approached the furnace to see more clearly. He saw 4 figures walking freely in the flames, talking as if in a safe place. The same fire that killed his strongest warriors had become a meeting place with the divine. The moment the young men emerged marked the climax of the miracle. When Nebuchadnezzar called them out, the 4th vanished, just as mysteriously as he had come. He had completed his mission to protect the faithful in their most dangerous moment and returned to the unseen realm. The 3 youths stepped out transformed. Not only were their bodies unharmed, their souls had encountered a reality that could never be forgotten. They had seen the divine not as an abstract idea, but as a living presence that intervenes in history for the sake of those who trust. Their testimony of the 4th in the fire became part of sacred Scripture, a prophetic image preparing the world to recognize the Messiah. The one who defended them in Babylon's furnace would one day come as Savior of the world, to defeat evil and death forever. When the flames died down and the three young men stood unharmed before Nebuchadnezzar, the empire faced a crisis of worldview. What was meant to affirm the king's authority had instead revealed a force greater than any earthly power. The king's reaction was immediate and dramatic. The same man who had just ordered their execution now praised their God publicly. Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him. The emperor's psychological shock ran deeper than awe. His power was built on the illusion of invincibility. The golden statue symbolized this. Every nation under his rule was to accept that no authority could surpass that of Babylon's king. But the miracle shattered that illusion. It revealed that there are realms beyond political reach, principles untouched by imperial logic, and a power that can deliver from certain death those who trust it completely. Nebuchadnezzar's new decree was revolutionary. He ordered that throughout the empire no one was to speak against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego on penalty of severe punishment. This became the first state-sanctioned declaration of religious freedom in ancient history. Even more surprising was what came next. The three who had refused to bow, who had been condemned to die, were promoted to even higher positions in Babylon's administration. The same system that sought to destroy them now elevated them. This detail carries deep prophetic weight. The book of Revelation describes those who do not worship the beast or its image. They shall reign with Christ for 1,000 years. Refusing to bow to evil does not lead to defeat. It opens the path to ultimate triumph. The miracle's influence spread far beyond Babylon. Merchants, diplomats, and soldiers carried the story to every corner of the empire. The account of three young men who survived the furnace became legend challenging the authority of pagan religions across the ancient world. Archaeological evidence confirms that following these events, synagogues began to appear throughout the Babylonian Empire, places where Jews could worship freely. Religious tolerance, often seen as a modern achievement, was born out of a miracle 26 centuries ago. Yet the greatest impact was spiritual. The three young men proved it was possible to live by divine principles even in the heart of a hostile empire. Their courage inspired thousands of exiled Jews, not to assimilate but to preserve their spiritual identity. Daniel, their friend, later wrote visions of the rise and fall of world empires. He foresaw Babylon giving way to Persia, then Greece, then Rome. But at the end of time, a fifth kingdom would arise, God's kingdom, that would destroy all others and reign forever. The story of the three young men foreshadowed that final victory. They showed that even the greatest earthly powers are powerless against those who trust in divine protection. Their refusal to bow was a prophetic act anticipating the future resistance of the end-time church against the image of the beast. Nebuchadnezzar, who had witnessed the miracle with his own eyes, would later experience another divine intervention, 7 years of madness that humbled him until he declared, "The Most High rules the kingdom of men and gives it to whom he will." The encounter with the three young men was only the beginning of the spiritual transformation of the most powerful ruler of the ancient world. In the 21st century, Nebuchadnezzar's golden statue has taken on new forms, but its essence remains. Global elites are building a system of values that demands the world's worship. Economic sanctions replace fiery furnaces. Social isolation replaces execution. But the principle is unchanged: submit or suffer. International financial institutions impose conditions on nations that often conflict with traditional religious values. Acceptance of LGBT ideology, abortion rights, and secular education are prerequisites for aid. Countries that resist face economic pressure, political isolation, and media warfare. Transnational corporations promote global corporate responsibility, standards that force businesses to endorse ideologies contrary to biblical principles. Companies that refuse lose market access, face boycotts, and fall behind competitors. Social media platforms enforce community guidelines that effectively ban the expression of traditional Christian views on marriage, family, and gender. AI algorithms are trained to detect and block content that challenges the new ideology of tolerance. Education has become a tool of ideological conditioning. From an early age, children are taught values that undermine parental authority, the traditional family, and religious convictions. Parents who resist face intervention by child services and accusations of abuse. Healthcare systems are now used to challenge personal beliefs. Mandatory vaccination, despite religious objections. Hormone therapy for children without parental consent, and euthanasia as a right to die with dignity. All these undermine the sanctity of life as a divine gift. Most alarming is the creation of a new kind of human being, one unable to resist the system. Constant exposure to information, dependence on social media, and consumer culture produce individuals who cannot think critically, make independent choices, or stand by principles. The 3 young men in Babylon showed a different path. They proved that it is possible to live by divine values even in the heart of a system hostile to them. Their story becomes a manual for believers in the last days. The first lesson: spiritual preparation for trials is essential. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego didn't make a last-minute decision. For years they had prepared by refusing royal food, keeping the Sabbath, and praying regularly, strengthening spiritual muscles for the ultimate test. The second lesson: unity brings strength. The 3 stood together. They encouraged one another and fortified each other's faith. In a world that isolates dissenters, a community of believers is vital. The third lesson: be ready for the consequences. They did not expect a miracle. They were prepared to die for their convictions. That readiness became the very condition of their deliverance. The fourth lesson: divine protection is real. The fourth in the fire was no symbol. He was a living presence who intervened in history to defend the faithful. That same protection is available today for those who trust God fully. The fifth lesson: refusing to worship the system doesn't lead to defeat, it leads to elevation. The young men were promoted after their trial. God can turn the enemy's plans into blessings for his servants. The sixth lesson: one act of faith can change an empire. The miracle with the 3 young men led to religious reform in Babylon, protection for believers, and global witness to the true God. Today, as the world crafts a new golden ideology, the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego becomes profoundly relevant. It reminds us that there is always a choice, always an alternative to surrendering to evil. The fourth in the fire still waits for those willing to enter the flames for the sake of eternal truth. The furnace of the end times will not consume those who entrust themselves entirely to divine protection. The story ends, but its prophetic message is only beginning to unfold in our day. Everyone who hears this account stands before the same choice the three faced in ancient Babylon: bow to the modern golden image, or remain faithful to God to the very end. That decision will shape not only personal destiny, but the future of humanity. For history shows that God always has a remnant who refuses to worship the system of evil, and through them he reveals his power to a world that has forgotten what true authority looks like. The trial by fire continues. The fourth still walks in the flames,